I told everyone. Okay, so yeah, it's quite better now, right? So we had seen how to launch the browsers dynamically. Okay, that is how to, dynamically open a browser, and if I have to write a single script, then how do I write a single script for different browsers? Right, we had seen that. Fine, so let's move from here. If you hear some background noise from my side, then please do let me know. Okay, so uh, this is the project. Okay, now once we have launched the browser, okay, if I have launched the browser and if I have gone to a website, then what we need to do is we need to investigate the web page, or we need to, interact with the elements on the web page. How do we do that? Okay, well, uh, you know, if I simply go and write a program over here, and I hope you are clear with whatever. Sorry, sorry. I hope you are clear with whatever we had studied earlier. Okay, that is how to open the browser, right? So we'll continue from there. Hold on. Let me add the jar files. Now we need to understand, okay, about two things about Selenium. The first thing is that how does Selenium work? Okay, even if I have enabled this project for Selenium, then we need to understand how Selenium works. How Selenium goes to a web page and identifies the elements on the web page. Okay, for example, if I go to the Facebook page and on the Facebook page, oh my God, it's coming in Hindi. Just a minute. How do I change the language? Anyways, if I am on Facebook, and or if I'm on any other website, okay, say I am on in.rediff.com. Okay, now the thing is, on different websites, the elements are of the same type. Okay, like we have buttons, we have links, we have normal text on the web page. Okay, suppose if I have to write a Selenium script which goes and types anything into this text field, then how do we do that? Okay, or a Selenium script which clicks on money link or business email or videos, or a Selenium script which clicks on sign in, and it goes and enters the user ID and password and logs you inside the website. So how do you do that? Okay, so it's quite easy. Okay, you need to understand how Selenium works. All right, to understand how Selenium works, you need to hold on. I'll just make a new Microsoft Excel. Okay, and I'll explain it with that. Okay, let me open this. So you are comfortable with opening the browsers, right? I had, sorry, I had stopped at that point, right? So, okay. Now, look, in order to interact with the web page, you need to understand what are the types of elements you'll be interacting with. Okay, generally on a web page, what are the element types? You have generally a text box, you have a regular button on the web page. Okay, you have checkboxes, you have radio buttons. Okay, then you have links on the web page. Okay. And guys, if you hear some background noise from my side, then let me know. Okay. Right. And then, are you hearing some background noise or is it fine?
It's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. Okay. So text box button is there, a checkbox is there, radio buttons are there, links are there on the web page. Then what else you have? You have images on the web page. Okay. Then you can have um,
Drop down.
Drop downs.
regular text which is there. You can have drop down, right? So generally these are the elements on every website. Okay. So I will just call this column as elements. Or in Selenium, what happens is that we call these elements as web elements. Okay, this is the technical word in Selenium, web elements. Okay, and every web element has a particular tag name and some mandatory attributes and some optional attributes. Okay, now what do you mean by this? Tag web element has a tag name, has some mandatory attributes and optional attributes. Well, if you look at this, then this is the username text field. Okay, you investigate this username text field. All right. So this username text field, if you right click on any element, you can investigate that element. Okay, you right click on the username text field, you will get the option to inspect and it will show the source code. I guess in the last class I had told you this. Sorry. Okay, so over here, this is the username text field. Okay, the tag name is input, the ID is login1. So there are there are different things available over here. The first thing which is there, a conical bracket, is known as a tag name. Okay, tag can have multiple attributes. These are the attributes. Type is the attribute, ID is the attribute, max length is the attribute, name, value, tab. So these are different attributes. Okay, if you go to any web page, okay, if I go to say the money section and under the money section, I click on my portfolio. So you will see that this is the page to enter the user ID and password. Okay, if you investigate this particular, say the submit button has the tag name input and there are few attributes. Now with the help of these tags and attributes, we go and identify the elements on the web page. Okay, like for example, if you talk about a text box, the tag name for a text box would always be input. Okay, if you talk about a button, the tag name for button is also input. If you have any button on the web page that will have an input tag. If you talk about a checkbox, this is the checkbox. Remember me checkbox. Okay, the tag name for the checkbox is always input as well. And based on my experience, I also know that the tag name for radio button is also input. So actually for these four elements which I've written on the top, and they have the same tag name input. All right. Now, if the tag name is same, then mandatory attribute and optional attribute. How do I do that? Okay, the mandatory attributes are um, in case of every text box. Okay, there will be a in case of every text field, there would be a type attribute and the value would be equal to text. Okay, in case of a email ID field, the type would be text. And in case of a button, the type is always equal to button. In case of a checkbox, the type is equal to checkbox. And in case of a radio button, the type is equal to a radio. Fine. So these are the mandatory attributes. And the optional attributes are ID and name. These might be present or might not be present with the elements. In case of a link, if you look at any link on a web page, say you click on the forgot password link. Okay, that this is the tag name A. Okay. For the links, the tag name is A, and there is a mandatory attribute known as href. This will always be there with any link. This points towards the URL which will open when you click on the link. Okay, most of you must be knowing about it. The href attribute for a link, okay, points towards the it points towards the URL which will open if you click on the link. Okay, right. Now, out here, if you talk about images, okay, y- look, like for example, this is the Rediff Moneyways image. No, this is not an image. No, on this page, is there an image? This is, yeah, this is an image at the bottom. Look, the thing is, the image always has the tag name img. Okay, the tag name, any image or any web page would start from the tag name img. Okay, and you will always find the source tag. The source tag will always represent the URL from which the image is loading. Okay, this is the source tag. If I just paste it over here, this is some small image which is getting loaded. Okay, so the source tag will always point towards the URL from which the image loads. Okay, right. And in case of a text, there is no fixed tag name. A text can be present in sometimes in div, sometimes in span, sometimes in para tag. Okay, there is no fixed tag name and there are no mandatory attributes. Okay, like for example, this is a regular text. Remember me. If I look at this, remember me, it is somewhere inside this div tag. So you don't have to, you cannot define text. In case of a drop down, okay, in case of a drop down, you have to understand. If I go to the website, say my website, QTP Selenium, and you go to contact us section. Hold on. Yeah. If you go here and if you then go to the country selection drop down, see this is a drop down. Okay. If you inspect this, then the tag name of the drop down is always select tag. Okay. In case of a drop down, the tag name is the select tag. And under one select tag, you have multiple option tags. Okay. That is option 1, option 2, option value 3. Each option tag, it represents the value of which is there in the drop down. So the tag name for the drop down is actually select. Fine. For a drop down, the tag name is select. There is no mandatory attribute. This is not applicable for drop downs. But all these elements can have and mandatory attributes like ID, name, or sometimes there is an attribute known as class. It's optional attribute, sorry. So these optional attributes, ID, name, or class might not be present for the element. Okay, or they might be present for the element. All right. But with the help of these mandatory attributes as well as the optional attributes, we go and identify the elements on the web page. Okay. Now, if the element is having an ID, or if the element is having a name, or if the element is having a class, it becomes slightly easy to identify the element, but you have to be very, very careful as well. Okay, right. Now, how do we do that? How do we go and identify the elements with the help of Selenium? Okay, most of you must have seen the command driver.find element and all. Okay, basically, I am I am coming over to that. If you go to the official website, selenium.dev, hold on. It's not opening. Yeah. If you go to the documentation, the API docs, right, and frames view. right? If you scroll down, you will see a class known as or an interface. We talked about interfaces, right? Let's see the WebDriver interface. Okay, WebDriver interface has got a command, hold on, has got a function find element. So it finds the element using the finds the first element using the given method. And it returns you reference of another interface known as web element. Now web element interface, if I open it, then web element interface is something which um, you can say that it is something which represents a generic element on a web page. Basically, I told you all these things, whatever we sorry studied, text box, button, checkbox, radio button, links, images, all these elements are web elements. Okay, right. So you need to understand that to handle all of them, you will need the interface web element. And the interface web element has got functions which can be fired on any element. Like, for example, get text, which will give you the text of the element. Is displayed will tell you whether it is displayed. Send keys will type into it. Okay, a function like click will click on the element. Okay, but in order to extract the web element, you have to fire the function find element with the web driver. Okay, for example, I'll just make a new, hold on, this is not responding. Give me a minute. Hold on. New class. Yeah. Okay, let me call it as Zoho login. Sorry, just a minute. Right. So if I write over here WebDriver equals to new Chrome driver. Okay, and you import the classes. Yes. Okay, and we move to the website, that is driver.get to http zoho.com. If I move over to this website and if I run this URL, hold on. Yeah. And suppose instead of going to this URL, I'll go to the URL where you sign in. Right. This is the URL. So suppose I have to enter the user ID. Okay, I have to enter some ID in this text field and I have to click on the next button. So if you analyze this text field, if you inspect it, if you look at it carefully, then this is the text field input tag. Luckily, we have an ID over here. If an element is having an ID, then it's really easy to identify the element because ID is supposed to be unique. No two elements on the page technically should have the same ID. Okay, and we have the command driver dot find element. This is the command which goes and finds the element on the web page. Okay, and that's exactly what I was telling in the documentation. Now, how will it find? Suppose if I have to enter the ID, how do I do that? So there is a class for it. That class is known as the by class. This is the most important class. It's got the mechanisms used to locate the elements within the document. That is by which criteria you want to identify the element. Whether you have to identify it with ID or link text or the name, partial link text, XPath, CSS selector. So these are known as different locator strategies. Okay, each of the functions over here. We'll study about them one by one. All right. So for example, you have driver.find element by the ID. Okay, every function in this class is static in nature. Okay, you can directly write over here by the ID and you can give the ID of the element. Okay, the ID of the element in our case is login ID. So this will go and find the element username on the web page. And in this will return you a web element. Okay. And what do you want to do with the username web element? Okay, you can mention over here username dot send keys, that is type. Send keys is equivalent to type in the text field. Anything you can give any value. I'll just give it a Gmail ID. Okay. So when you run this code, you will see that the browser opens and see it goes and types the value in the text field. Okay. And similarly, if you have to click on the next button, see this is the next button and it's got the tag name button. Okay. And it's also got an ID. So if you have an ID, it's really good. Fine. So you click on the username, then you click on the button. So first to extract the web element with driver.find element command, and then you interact with the element. Okay, I can write button dot click on the web element, fire the click function. Right. So when you run this, this is going to again start the script from the beginning. In Selenium, you cannot start the script from between. Every time you run, it starts from the very beginning. Okay. So you see that it clicks on the next button. Right. Okay. Now to interact with one element, we are writing two lines of code. Okay. You can also avoid this. I'll comment out this part. Avoid writing two lines of code. You can simply write a single line, that is say driver.find element by the ID over here, dot send keys, and you can provide the email ID. Okay. Similarly, driver.find element by the ID next button, dot send keys or dot click. Look, the execution starts from left to right. First, this part is evaluated. The web element is extracted. On the web element, you fire sorry, the function send keys. Then over here also, you have the extraction starts on the left side and then the function is fired on the web element. Okay, right. So this is how it actually works. Fine. Now, if I run this, you will get the same output. Right. You get the same output if you run this. I'll close the browser. Right. Now, what if, there are two questions arise which come up. What if the first question is what if the element is not present over here? If I give an ID which is not existing, what's going to happen? If I give such ID, you will see that when the browser runs, it will reach the web page and it immediately throws an exception. Exception is an unwanted situation in which you don't want to be. Okay. And it throws the exception, no such element exception. If you get this exception anytime, you should understand that Selenium is not able to find an element on the web page. And it gives you clear, detailed description that it is trying to find some element with ID. And there is a detailed exception trace in which the file name would be present. That is the exception is coming in Zoho login line number 21. If you click on it, that line number will also get highlighted. So no such element exception. You should not get afraid of this exception. You should try to understand how to read it clearly. Every exception, not just this exception, every exception which you will get in future will have the line number. Okay. Now driver.find element by the ID this dot send keys Selenium Training 10. I've written over here. Okay. So over here, if you type this, it's going to type into it, but if the element is not found, it will throw you no such element exception. Sometimes you want to wait because the element might take some more time to load on the web page. Okay, it happens at times. You want to tell Selenium that fine, wait for some time and then try to type into it. Okay, now one there are multiple ways to do it, but the best way is that you give something known as explicit weight over here. Sorry, not explicit, implicit weight. Okay, that is you give the command driver dot manage dot timeouts dot implicitly wait for 20 seconds. Time unit dot seconds. What is implicit weight? Implicit weight is something. It is the default wait time. Okay, it is something which is applicable to all driver dot find element commands. I have got two driver dot find element commands. If I would had 10 driver dot find element commands, it would have been applicable to all the commands. Basically, it tells that find wait maximum 20 seconds for an element if it is not found. Okay, so whenever you write driver dot find element command, okay, it will wait maximum 20 seconds and it is dynamic. The advantage is that it is dynamic. What do you mean by it is dynamic? If the element is found in the 10th second, so it will not wait for 20 seconds. It will use the element and it will move forward. So if you run this program, you will see that the Chrome driver starts and it goes to Zoho and it's not typing and it's not even throwing the error. So it's constantly checking whether this ID is present on the web page or not. And it will check for 20 seconds. After 20 seconds, it will throw the exception. You see that? No such element exception. Sorry. Okay. So this is how this thing works. Implicit weight. It is applicable to all driver.find element commands. So if the element is not found having the ID or the locator, then implicit weight will make Selenium poll for the element continuously. Another scenario which can arise is that what if there are two elements on the web page with the same ID? Okay, suppose I'll open my Microsoft Paint. Suppose this is the web page. On the web page, suppose you have got two elements. One is over here, one is over here, and both the elements they have the same ID. Okay, say the ID is X. And if I write driver.find element by the ID, how will this work? Okay, look, Selenium scans the page like this from left to right for the elements and it goes down the web page. And driver.find element will find the first element. Okay, Selenium will use this one and it will ignore this one if both of them have the same ID and if you use driver.find element. If you look at the documentation, then driver.find element says that it finds the first web element using the given method. Okay, right. So this will obviously find the first element on the web page. But what if you want to use the second one or something? There are ways to do that. I will tell you that later on. Okay, but if two elements have the same ID, then understand Selenium will use the first one. Rather, two elements should not have the same ID. You should talk to the developer of the website and tell him that fine, please create unique IDs. These two elements have the same ID. But still, in case if it happens, then Selenium will use the first one. Okay. Now that is good that you can use ID. Sometimes you have name. Okay. Like if I look at the user ID field, um, I have taken a very easy example. It's also got a name. So if an element is having a name, it is really easy to identify it again. The name of this element is in uppercase login underscore ID. So in the by class, you have the locator name as well. You have another locator strategy that find the element by the name, and you can provide the name from the page source. Okay, so when you run this, the output will still be the same right now, but now we have used by the name attribute. So if an element is having ID or name, it's really easy to identify it. Okay, you see it's working. Okay, but what if these things are not there, name or ID? Then we have other locator strategies. We have XPaths, we have CSS selectors. Okay, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. Okay, if you look at the Excel which I had made, I told you that these are the three optional attributes: ID, name, class. I did not talk about the class right now, but yes, ID and name, if any element is having, you should feel lucky. You should see that fine. It's easy to identify. But if it is not having any ID or name, not every element on the web page would have an ID or a name. Say if I want to click on this forgot password link, this is the forgot password link. There is no ID or a name. It's got attribute class, but class is dicey. Class is not unique at times. So how do I work with this element? So in this case, we use XPaths or CSS selectors, which we'll see next. Okay. I'll talk about XPaths in tomorrow's class. I'll stop here. My throat is really gone dry. Okay, just give me some time, right? So we'll look at XPaths and CSS selectors in tomorrow's class, and I'm going to mail you the recording of this class. If you have any, sorry, if you have any questions right now, you can please ask me anything.